actually had a few moments in life where I felt like I was doing it right. Anybody relate to that? I remember 17 years old and going to the Navy, and that's actually where I met my beautiful wife, Evita, out here in the crowd supporting me. I love you. We actually started dating through church, and eventually got married, had kids, and again, I thought I was doing this thing right. I eventually went back to college, got my degree finished up, became a workaholic working 60, sometimes 70 hours a week. And lo and behold, with a college degree and becoming a workaholic, I made it into management. Had the 401k, benefits, life insurance. Again, thought I was doing it really, really well. But the problem with thinking that you're doing it right is that it leads to a false sense of security because none of us can secure the future. And for my family, whatever security we thought we had was ripped from under us in 2012. You see, we have two children, twin boys named Darius and Demetrius. And around 2012, the summer of 2012, they turned 6 years old. But I started to notice something wrong with one of my children. This was a very exciting time of life for me because they were old enough to play sports now. So I went out to the store and bought every type of ball there was, and I took my boys out to the grass. And the first thing I thought to teach my 6-year-olds was how to catch an over-the-shoulder pass while running full speed, because of course that was appropriate to a dad like me. But I noticed as Darius began to run through the grass, he was kind of zigzagging. He couldn't run in a straight line. And I filed that into the back of my mind. It wasn't a big deal. I stopped him. Hey, son, let's run that play back again. I tell him to run another time. So again, he's zigzagging through the grass. He can't run in a straight line. So I just filed that in my mind. No big deal. Maybe he's just not good at sports. But in the coming weeks, there are some other things popping up. The school nurse would call myself or my wife to tell us that Darius is complaining of dizziness and headaches. And so they would just send him down in the nurse's office. They'd give him some water, let him sit there until he felt better, send him back to class. And this was happening 2 to 3 times a week. On top of that, I can remember visiting my mother's house, my parents' house for the holidays, and my mother looking at my son and saying, "Hey, Kevin, I think there's something wrong with Darius's head. It looks, I don't know, maybe swollen." I didn't really see it. But we made a doctor's appointment. Doctor said, "Your son has iron deficiency anemia." So they prescribed vitamins and a diet regimen. So we changed all of those things up at home to help get our son better. But things got worse. And I can remember one time watching my son, 6 years old now, walk to the bathroom, and he's having to hold on to the wall to keep himself steady. We said, there's got to be something else. So the next day, we take our son to the hospital to be examined. And I can remember my mother and my wife in the examination room. I had stayed out because only so many could be inside the room at one time. I was out, I think, speaking to my boss about missing work because of something happening at the hospital with my son. And as I'm outside of the examination room, I remember my mother bursting through the door. And when she came through that door, I saw a look on her face that I'd never seen, and instantly I knew that something was wrong. And from that moment forward, everything else was in slow motion. My mother ran to me. I don't even remember what she said to me. I just remember her running to me, waving me into the room, and me walking in, already dreading what the doctor's going to say. I walk in, and my wife is already crying. The doctor tells me that my 6-year-old son, Darius, has a brain tumor. This tumor had grown to the size of a golf ball, and it was blocking the cerebral spinal fluid as it passed through his body, which is what caused the swelling, the dizziness, the headaches, the balance problems. And so he needed to be seen immediately, but my insurance did not cover pediatric neurosurgeons in my area. Although we lived in San Diego, my son had to be rushed in an ambulance to Los Angeles to have his head opened up just to relieve the pressure before his major surgery. Now, I won't go into all of the details, but we found out that that tumor was in fact cancerous. 2 more surgeries later, 18 months of chemotherapy, and 31 radiation treatments later, my son was supposedly healed or cured from his cancer. Now, these things saved his life, but the radiation damaged his pituitary gland so that now it doesn't know how to tell his body which hormones to produce and how much of them to produce in order for his body to grow. And this is something that's come up years later as a result of this life-saving procedure. And so now my son requires, we found out in 2018, requires this daily growth hormone in order for his body to simply grow. Something that I consider the most basic function of any organism is to simply grow, and my son's body doesn't know how to do that without this medication. We started in 2018, things are going well. And later on during that year, the corporation I work for started to roll out plans for this new insurance plan. The company president came out. He gathered up all of the employees. He told us about how great this new plan was going to be, how much money it was going to save us, how much better our insurance privileges are going to be. So they roll this plan out. We head into 2019, and my wife goes to the pharmacy to pick up our son's medicine. Now, in 2018, the copay for this daily medication was $15 a month. January of 19, under our newer insurance plan, that copay went up to $1,735. Now, I went back and did the math on this. That's an 11,460% increase in this price. And just like that, my family is now a part of those millions of other Americans who cannot afford their medicine. And why is that? Why are there so many people suffering, unable to receive the medicine they need for their bodies to operate properly? I looked into my own corporation, my own employer, the people that I work for 60 hours a week. Their financial records are public. I come to find out they have $3.9 billion in cash reserves. Now, they always tell us we can't afford to give you better medical because it's so expensive. We can't make a profit. We won't be able to stay in business if we increase the benefits. But I looked at what they paid employees, all of their employees for the entire year, and if they doubled the pay and benefits of every single employee, they still would have made almost $3 billion in profit on top of the $3.9 billion already in cash reserves. So again, why are we suffering? Why can I no longer afford my son's medicine? Why can some of you not afford your medication? It's simply corporate greed, nothing else. This incident threw me into a very deep and dark depression because of everything my son has gone through in the past 6 years. Whenever anything goes wrong with his body, it just tears me to pieces that he has to suffer even more. Eventually, I stopped going to work. I stopped bathing, stopped brushing my teeth, children knocking on my bedroom door. Daddy, what's wrong? Why is Daddy always crying? I can remember when my wife gave me that phone call to tell me that our medicine had increased from $15 to $1,700, and I began to sob immediately. I picked up my phone and I called my mother, I called my other partner, I called a friend. I tried to get a hold of anybody that could make sense of what was happening. I walked down the street sobbing, tears in my eyes, fluids running from my nose and mouth. Walked through the aisles of the store sobbing audibly. Think I was going to get some ice cream or something to try to help calm myself down. Cried myself walking through the street back home, and I can remember for some reason not one person stopped to ask me what was going on. But this depression had so many layers on top of it. You see, I grew up under that old patriarchal mindset to where a man's job and how well he provided for his family was his entire image. So now what does that say about me as a father, as a husband, as a man, when I cannot provide these very necessary things for my family? My father himself was homeless before I was born, lived on the street. And so the relationship between work and money has very deep roots in my family. And all of these layers came crashing down on me all at once, and again, threw me into a very deep depression. At the height of that, I can remember laying in bed one morning, crying again. It had been maybe a couple weeks after. And I was laying on my back. The tears were welling up. The saliva, the mucus was welling up, and it began to choke me. But I can remember at that moment being so defeated, so hopeless, and in so much pain and turmoil, I didn't even have the energy to roll over to keep myself from choking. It was at that moment I knew I needed to get some help. I got an individual therapy session going and then ended up in some group therapy. And in doing my own research to try to find my own healing, I came across an acronym, ACT, A-C-T, ACT, in a book called The Art and Power of Acceptance by Ashley Bush. Now, the first letter in this acronym, A, is for acceptance. You see, much of the turmoil that we feel in life, much of the resistance that we're feeling in life is simply because we have not accepted our reality. Now, this doesn't mean that you're giving up or that what's happening is right, but it means that you're no longer resisting what is. And after you learn to accept reality, it dissolves that resistance that's causing you so much pain and turmoil. The second letter in this acronym, C, stands for connect with humanity. When I finally did get back to work and started to tell my coworkers, I was very vocal about this, to all of my entire management, all the way up into our director. They had to call me into the office to calm things down. But I found out that there were coworkers going through this very same thing. So many people unhappy with this new medical coverage. And outside of work, so many other people that cannot afford their medication for the same reason, corporate greed. And in connecting with others who's fighting the same battle, going through the same struggle, I was able to find some relief. They're going through it too. I met people who had already have gone through this incident, and so they have answers. There's people who have gone through it, so I know I'm going to make it now. The final letter in this acronym, the T, is really when I finally started to feel my healing. That T stands for talk kindly to yourself. My healing began when I began to speak to myself as I would a loving friend. Because before I was tearing myself up, I was blaming myself. I'm an inadequate provider. I can't figure this out. I don't know what to do about my problems. Something's wrong with me. And once I started to talk kindly to myself, it's when my healing really began to take hold. What this did was freed up all that anxiousness, all of the pain, the worry, the doubt, freed up all of that energy to align it with reality, with what is. And that's brought about a new sense of clarity in my life. And right there is where I stand in my journey, finally healthy enough to begin crafting my own new narrative. Thank you.